Well, we can speak now to a teacher at a secondary school on the outskirts of Paris to get his perspective on it all, Mr. Gabriel Lattanzio. Thanks for being with us. After the shock of last week, how do you feel today when it comes to teaching here in France? Firstly, maybe when it comes to security. I mean, this isn't the first time that schools have actually been targeted by terrorists.
Sure. I'm not scared. I'm worried. I'm concerned. It's not so much what teachers will face in the coming weeks or months. It is more about what the institution expects us to do, I believe. This story, this drama is many, many things. It is a tale of terror with religious motives, of course, but it also tells the story of how we look at teachers. It's also the story of how teachers are discredited, I believe. Think about the people who did not commit the murder, but felt that Samuel Paty was the enemy and thought so much that they denounced his teaching online. And so this is cultural evolution that I'm concerned about. Also, I believe the challenge we're facing right now as teachers, and this is what we talk about with my colleagues, is how the institution looks at us. When an institution fails, when it is faced with some new challenge set, it looks at ways to defend itself, right? The way I see it and what I believe teachers are waiting for is a willingness to take on new responsibilities. Yeah.
And even we saw after the wider terrorist attacks in Paris and in France in 2015, we saw this class actually that Samuel Paty was giving called civic education. It was reformed. Can you tell us a bit more about what this civic education class is here in France? You know, what kind of topics does it contain? Have you given it? What are the subjects?
Oh, it's always been there for a while. Even myself, when I was a student 20 years ago, it already existed. It's 30 minutes a week that we spend, making sure that kids understand civics, understand the way the electoral system works. The way it has changed in the past few years is that they added a moral component to it. There was this hope that if we talked about morals and values, we might have better citizens. Obviously, there is some limit to this approach, I think. It's not just a tale of pedagogy, how we teach. It's beyond this. The challenge we're facing is really how protected are teachers with new challenges. And I'm not sure that having the conversation about what we teach will solve that.
Where do you think the solution is? I mean, we've heard Emmanuel Macron even saying he wants to get rid of homeschooling and there's try and cut out separatism in the country. But what do you think should be done to help the schools here?
I think the government's approach right now is finding the right words. It's about finding the right enemies. There was this quote by Jean-Michel Blanquer, the Secretary of Education, very recently, who said, "The doctrine has always been full support for teachers." This is not substantial enough, in my view. What I'm hoping for is that we understand the worth of schools in general. You should know, last month, a few weeks ago, Jean-Michel Blanquer himself asked President Macron to add 3,000 teachers for primary schools. And the government said no. And they said no because this would not contribute to the economy. And I think this is a problem. I think not investing in the future through the education of our kids right now is very much the same thing as running a deficit. If running a deficit is taking money away from the future, as people will have to pay it back later, well, not giving the education for kids now is the very same thing. We're taking away from the future. And the conversation really is about how hopeful we are. And also there's this question about security. Look, I'll say something. I'm sorry. Yes, I'm listening to you.
No, go ahead. I'm just thinking, resources and support. It sounds like teachers feel very much left to their own devices in many areas. But there was another question I was curious about, because secularism in France is quite different. I know you've studied in the United States and you can see, tell us a bit about how France is particular in this area.
Oh, sure. In a few words, it's quite the challenge to do so. But I'll say that I talk about American culture a lot with my students because this is what I know. And there's a statistic I tell them about, which is that many Americans believe in the right to offend. And in France, we don't so much. We are certainly a country where we find that secularism is key. But at the same time, I feel with my students that it's hard for them to differentiate between morals and the law, between what's right and what's forbidden. To them, these are weird notions. If something is bad, a kid will think that it is something you cannot do. but there are bad things that you can do and that are fine to do. And this is what this civics class really is about, or what being a teacher really is about. I teach them English, but I also find myself having to explain different cultures, and understanding different cultures, leads to a better understanding of oneself. Look, when it comes to security, I would like to say this: the following idea. I think the current discussion about teacher safety is twisted in a way that will be non-productive. There are rumors online about how our colleague was to be disciplined, and I'm glad it has been debunked. But if the point of view of the administration is to say we did it by the book, well, then maybe rewrite the book. Let's start by saying we failed somewhere. I think that's the main point I would like to put forward today. There's this complex relationship between administrative work and teaching work in France. It really should be that administrative work comes in support to teaching. We should be the one who are trusted by the administration, and it's not the other way around. The administration should not ask us to trust them blindly. I think in recent years, what I feel is that teaching work comes in support of administrative goals. And I think we need a cultural change. We really do.
You're putting the priority of the students first. Now, another point that I wanted to bring up with you, I believe you feel that more and more the youth in France are divided rather than being brought together. They're very much in their own communities. Tell me a bit about your feelings on that.
It's such a complicated topic. I will not pretend I have the answer to give to you in 30 seconds. Now, that said, I think division is the opposite of solidarity in my view. And I believe as a nation, we tend to be a little bit less in solidarity with one another, I would say. That's the value that's lost, not so much an identity. When there's a football game, soccer game, there is unity. People feel French, people are proud, people celebrate all together. But sometimes that sense of identity is quite fleeting. It is there and it can go away quite rapidly. Now, the real question, I believe, is how do we build a stronger nation through a shared value, which would be empathy, compassion, love, and truth. I know that sounds quite religious in a way, but this is what we're missing. Look, in recent years, myself having taught where I teach, we have been faced with challenges such as teenage violence. That's also an aspect of the question that we have to deal with. And it's something we haven't heard recently. The killer was 18 years old. And what we see with statistics is that extreme violence really comes between age 15 and 25. And this is a topic that we have not addressed. Myself, I feel like I'm on the front line of making kids better. That's my job. But I don't think we have quite understood how we can prevent teenage violence yet. And this is also something that we have to think about, and not just hope that we'll find the right word or the right book which will tell the students and this will solve everything. I think it really is a story about sociopathy. Can we even say it? It is. A sociopath committed something horrible. Maybe this is more and more common. Maybe we just don't want it. We don't want it to happen so much. Well, then let's invent a new form of psychology for kids or psychiatry for kids that works hand in hand with schools. I think that's another challenge.
Okay, fascinating to hear your views on it all and the reforms that should maybe be taken into consideration in a French education system. Mr. Gabriel Lattanzio, thanks so much for taking time out and speaking to us here on France 24.